No. Aha, it works.
Okay, we'll get started on time today. All right,
Oh,
everyone. Well, thank you so much for attending today's session. The session today, we're going to talk about the importance of self-efficacy with teachers and students. And just a little bit about me, I am the Director of Education and Development for the Aldrin Family Foundation, and I have a PhD in science education. My research focus is on space education and looking at teachers and students' self-efficacy. So we're going to talk about a lot of really interesting things today, and I know that earlier in our beginning sessions, a couple of the astronauts were talking about how important it is for children and teachers and students to be excited and to feel confident in space. And so that's what today's topic is going to be all about. So here's a little agenda of what we're going to talk about. We're going to do a quick introduction of self-efficacy. We'll talk about the sources of self-efficacy. So how can we target self-efficacy in our students and in our teachers? We're going to talk about ways to improve, how to measure it, and then we'll have a little group discussion at the very end. So just a quick overview of some of the problems in modern space education. Most of you probably already know these things, but one of the main things is that students are performing below other spacefaring nations on international assessments. And this is a big deal because the United States needs to maintain its national security, to maintain its position as a global leader in space. And so we want our students to be performing at or above these other spacefaring nations. Research is also showing that students are having a declining interest in STEM careers, which is surprising because there are a lot of federal programs and initiatives to help spark that interest in students. And despite all those efforts, we're still seeing a declining interest in STEM careers. We still have unbalanced demographics. For example, women are hard to come by in STEM. And unfortunately, teachers just don't have the tools that they need in space education. There's a lot of them that are teaching out of field, and there's a lot of, there's a lack of university involvement in space education. There's programs for other science disciplines like biology, chemistry, physics, etc. But a lot of universities lack teacher preparation programs in space education. So these are all problems that we need to solve. And some of that can start with self-efficacy. Okay, so why do we care about self-efficacy? There's a lot of research that shows that self-efficacy leads to greater academic success with students. And it also shows that students who have higher self-efficacy tend to pursue STEM careers. We want to target those things for our students. On the teacher side, teachers with higher self-efficacy tend to be more effective at their teaching practice, and they tend to enjoy their jobs more. They're more confident at what they do. Okay, so what is self-efficacy? That's a big word. Basically, it's a person's belief in their abilities. And this is a term coined by Albert Bandura. He's a very famous psychologist, and he coined this term back in the 70s, but this is still a term that is used even today, and it's a heavily researched topic in education, particularly science education, but space education is sort of a niche that is up and coming that needs more research. Another way to describe self-efficacy is like a person's confidence. How confident do they feel in their abilities doing things? So there are 4 sources of self-efficacy that lead to its development, which then leads to a person's behavior or performance. And so we're going to look at each of these 4 sources of self-efficacy today, and then specifically what those look like in space education. Okay, so our first source, and this is the most important one, mastery experiences. So another word for this is like practice. This is a person's firsthand success. And there's a lot of research that shows that self-efficacy is the strongest source. And so if there's anything that teachers need to target for their students, it's those mastery experiences. And this might look like, remembering or reflecting on a person's past performance. So asking students to reflect on what they learned, or engaging students in hands-on activities, a person's content understanding levels that can contribute to mastery experiences, earning good grades or good teaching evaluations, winning a competition or getting a promotion. These are all things that contribute or count as mastery experiences. And this source of self-efficacy seems to be the strongest. Another source of self-efficacy is vicarious experiences. So this is sort of like role models, like secondhand success. And there is research that shows that role models or vicarious experiences might be stronger for women than it is for men. So that's an interesting thought to consider for your students, especially for increasing women in the STEM demographic. And so what some examples of this might include observing your peers succeed, even observing a recording of yourself succeed, that secondhand success. Maybe a professional role model that has the same demographic as you, whether that's your gender or your age or your skin color or your language or your culture. Lots of different ways to target vicarious experiences. Okay, third one, social persuasion. This is really important for teachers to encourage their students. It's when you have encouragement from somebody else. So you can do this, or even from yourself, I'm capable of this, or you're so good at doing, X, Y, and Z. You add value to our team. Hearing that from others or even from yourself can help you feel more confident in what you're doing. And research shows that this tends to be more effective when the persuasion comes from somebody you perceive as trustworthy. So if teachers create an atmosphere in their classroom that sort of caters to trustworthiness or caters to genuine encouragement, to your students, that tends to be more believable and more powerful. Okay, fourth one, and I know we're going really fast through these, but I want to get to our space education focused slides. Okay, so the last one, physiological and affective states. This is sort of like how you feel in the moment, and this might be positive, which is going to increase your self-efficacy. So like feeling happy or feeling joyful or excited or engaged, that's going to improve your self-efficacy. On the negative side, if you feel frustrated or stressed out, that's going to decrease your self-efficacy. This is really evident for teachers. So for example, if a teacher is teaching in a classroom and their students are engaged and the teacher is excited about the topic and everything is organized and structured, that's going to develop the teacher's self-efficacy because everything is going in a positive direction. If your classroom is out of control and students are talking over you and everything is disorganized, that can lower self-efficacy. So these physiological and affective states you are very important to help improve how your students are feeling in your classroom and how your teacher is feeling in their classroom. Okay, so let's get into the good stuff. Let's talk about space. Space can be used as a context to improve self-efficacy for teachers and students. There's a lot of research in education and self-efficacy. There's a lot of research in science and self-efficacy, but space education, this is sort of a niche topic. It's fairly new, and there's very little research in this area, but using past evidence, this can potentially be a context to improve self-efficacy for our teachers and students. Okay, excuse me one second. So let's talk about mastery experiences. What does this look like? Well, in our earlier slides, we talked about how mastery experience, this is like practice. Practice makes perfect. Firsthand success. In space education, this can look like a lot of different ways. One of the things that we saw in some of our previous sessions in our conference today is how space can be interdisciplinary. It's not just science, it's not even just STEM. You can bring space into an art class or a physical education class or a music class, history class. When you provide your students at your school with these cross-curricular space-themed lessons, that provides students a way to get involved in space in ways other than science. And that cumulative together can help build students' self-efficacy. So teachers, what you can do is collaborate with other subject areas in your school. How can you bring space into your art classes? And that can carry over into your science class. Or how can you bring space into your math class, which carries over into history class? That cross-curricular theme can really help build those mastery experiences to help your students develop self-efficacy. Another way is competitions. And so Space Prize is a women's competition for students. That's a great way to get students those mastery experiences where their firsthand success, they're able to engage in these activities, compete with others, and see themselves succeed and capable. Another way, and this is just an example, but satellite build programs. This is a new development in some education contexts where students can work hands-on on actual flight-ready satellites, or even prototype satellites, to learn all of these different STEM-based skills, career readiness skills that are space related. I mean, how cool is that? Every student's going to be so excited to work on something like a satellite, or maybe working on robots that simulate remote sensing. All of those things count as mastery experiences and are space themed, a great way to get students engaged and excited while also building their self-efficacy. Another example, classroom telescopes. So for teachers, formal education is so important. And so any chance that your teachers or you have the opportunity to engage in like conferences like this one, that is a great way to build your self-efficacy, because you're experiencing success firsthand. If your local university offers any kind of space-themed professional development or education courses, those are also great ways to get yourself to improve your own self-efficacy to bring back to your classroom. Okay, so let's talk about vicarious experiences, and this is a great one. We really want our students to see that everybody belongs in space, and you don't have to be an astronaut, you can be anybody, but teachers need to be very intentional about making sure that lots of a variety of demographics are represented in their classrooms. And this is not just good for, the individual that is living vicariously through that person, but also for all the students to see all sorts of different demographics are involved in space. And so again, this might look like maybe intentionally playing a video of astronauts on the ISS that are from different countries, or maybe are women, or have different skin colors, or maybe even speak a different language. Exposing your students to all of those things can help them live vicariously through those professionals and maybe see themselves, oh, she can do that, I can do that too, as an example. Another way to bring vicarious experiences into your classroom is to bring in student mentors, maybe past students that successfully completed a project with you. You can have them come back into your classroom and talk to your students and share, how they were able to succeed, maybe offer advice. Your students can ask questions. Another way is through career studies. So one of the projects that I used to like to do with my students in classrooms is to ask students to pick a STEM career, research a space STEM career, and then draw a picture of yourself doing that career, or interview yourself as that career. There's lots of different ways to get students thinking about themselves in that role, whether that's firsthand or secondhand like this here. Now with teachers, a great way to get them exposed to vicarious experiences is through career shadowing. They can learn about all these different STEM skills. They can learn content knowledge by shadowing other STEM professionals. And that connection right there can make a huge difference in them seeing themselves as capable of teaching this content. Another way is to observe your peers teaching space lessons. And a lot of that can happen at conferences like this one today. Okay, so let's talk about our third one, social persuasion. This one's really important for teachers to do with their students, but also for teachers to hear from each other. And so cooperative learning structures can be really helpful. Some of you may have heard of Kagan learning strategies before, or Kagan learning structures. And this is a very organized way of teaching where your students go through step by step, but after every step they say, thank you for sharing that information. Your input is valuable, or hey, you did a great job with this. That literal verbal feedback, that positive reinforcement is really important to add to social persuasion. Teacher encouragement is also a big one. There's a lot of research that shows that people who do pursue STEM careers do so because they were encouraged by a teacher. And so why not use that to your advantage? Encourage your students to pursue these things, and they might just do that. Parent involvement is also really important. And I know that can be hard, when you're in your classroom, the parents of the students aren't there, but get your parents involved. Tell them what you're doing in your classrooms. Teach them about, or you can hand out like email newsletters or flyers that talk about the new and upcoming events that are going on in space. What are your students learning about in the space classroom? And you can encourage them to visit space themed places like Kennedy Space Center here in Florida, school STEM days. Get those parents involved, so that way students have not only the teacher supporting them, but also the parents supporting them. And then for teachers, there's so much support from the space industry for teachers. And I know it's hard to find sometimes, we have to seek it out. But there's, for example, NASA STEM Engagement that provides tons and tons of free lessons. Blue Origin provides tons of free lessons through Club Through the Future. You can sign up for education newsletters that hand out free lessons. There's grants that you can apply for. There's tons of support to help build your self-efficacy, to show you that you are capable of teaching space and you are meant to be teaching space. Okay, last one. So physiological and affective states. The biggest one is that kids just are naturally curious about space. They love learning about space, and there's research supporting this. And so that in and of itself makes space such a great context to build students' self-efficacy in science and in STEM. But other ways that you can target student excitement is perhaps through immersive space experiences like virtual reality experiences. And, for example, I work with the Aldrin Family Foundation. We have these giant moon maps. They're like 30 feet across. They're huge. Students get so excited seeing those. They see all the colors. It's immersive. They love that. And then another one is permission to overcome failure. A lot of students are really hard on themselves, and when they see themselves fail in a classroom, that can lower their self-efficacy. But when a teacher builds a warm and welcoming environment, it's okay to fail. This is how we deal with our failure. This is what we can learn from it. That welcoming environment can make a big difference for the students, and to help relieve that stress and make those failures a more positive and enjoyable experience and learning opportunity for those students. Likewise, for teachers, positive space experiences can build their self-efficacy, get them excited. So attend a rocket launch if you're in a position to do so. You can stream rocket launches from your classroom for your students, and together work on building joy in that self-efficacy in your classroom. Strong classroom management is also really important. A lot of school districts will offer professional development on classroom management. So any opportunity that you have to take those professional developments, do so, because when you are confident in the classroom and feel structured and organized in the classroom, you're going to feel more confident. That's going to build your self-efficacy, and that carries over to your students as well. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the self-efficacy research initiatives that we're doing at the Aldrin Family Foundation. One of the most recent being the partnership between local universities and school districts. We recently finished a study looking at student and teacher self-efficacy using our giant moon maps. These maps are huge. You can see on the screen just how big they are. You can fit your whole class sitting on them. They're colorful, they're immersive, they're exciting, it captures their attention. And what we found is that every single classroom that used the maps in such a way, the lessons were designed also to include the sources of self-efficacy. 100% of the classrooms showed an improvement in self-efficacy with the students. So this is just one piece of evidence to show that really being intentional about targeting those 4 sources of self-efficacy can make a huge difference for your students. And what we're finding is that students that have higher self-efficacy tend to be more interested in STEM careers, tend to be more confident learning and doing science. And teachers, the same thing. When they engage in all of these sources, they feel more effective teaching. They are more effective teaching. And that again carries over to their students. When the teacher is more effective and has higher self-efficacy, the students benefit from that as well. And so what the Aldrin Family Foundation is doing is when we bring our products into the school districts, we want to measure these things. We want to show how we can be successful and how the products can be successful at encouraging teacher and student self-efficacy in the classroom. Okay, so I know this looks like a lot, this chart here, but these are some citations that you can use to measure your student self-efficacy. It's not just asking your student, how confident do you feel learning this? Or how confident do you feel doing this? There are ways that are that you can measure this that are vetted and heavily researched. A lot of these scales are at different grade levels. And so let's do this. Let's see in the chat, what grade level do you teach? Or if you teach at all, what grade level have you taught? Okay, so I see grades 4 through 8. That's great. What else? High school? Middle school? Okay, grades 5 through 18. So some post-secondary. Okay, so as you're typing in your grade levels that you teach, there are many different scales that you can use to measure your student self-efficacy. And I'll put my email in the chat. If you need help locating a scale, I can help you. I can help you locate one of those scales. But measuring your student self-efficacy is just one way to get an idea of where your students are today and think of what sources of self-efficacy can you include in your classroom? What mastery experiences can you include? Vicarious experiences, et cetera, can you incorporate in your classroom to target your students' self-efficacy? Okay, so how do we measure teacher self-efficacy? Well, there is a scale that has been heavily vetted and used since the 90s. And there's a link here on the screen. You don't have to click that now, but this is just more information about the scale. There's two versions, one for in-service and one for pre-service teachers. And what I've done is created a little mock survey for all of you to try. And there's a QR code on the screen, and I'm also going to share it in the chat here. And I'm going to give all of you 5 minutes to take this sample survey. Now, this is an adapted survey off of the ones that I had cited previously. This is called the STEBI A, and so this is for in-service teachers. And you can see, how is your self-efficacy right now? How do you measure up? Are there areas that you need to work on in the classroom? So go ahead and take 5 minutes and take the survey, and we'll look at the results and we'll talk about them together. As you are taking the survey, I'm dropping in the chat a link to a middle school version. I know that some of you teach different grade levels, but if you happen to teach middle school, there's a link in the chat that you can use with your students. Okay, let's do, I think we have 2 more minutes. Our results are coming in. Take about 30 more seconds. So I'm going to switch my screen share. Now this was totally anonymous, so no one's names are going to be here, but let's have a look at some of these results. Okay, so we can see we're all over the place, and this is very indicative of what we see in the classroom too. So just looking at finding better ways to teach space science, we have most of the people that kind of agree, but not strongly agree. And we want all of our teachers to be able to say that they strongly agree teaching space science. And so what this tells me as a researcher is we need our teachers to have more mastery experiences. We need our teachers to feel like they have the content knowledge and the skills that they need to teach. We can look here. This one's really interesting. We can see that the majority of our respondents either agree or disagree that they don't teach space science as well as other subjects. Maybe they feel confident equally in all the subjects, but we want them to feel like they're confident teaching space science as well as all the other topics. And so it's really interesting to see these results. Look at this one. I know the steps necessary to teach space science concepts effectively. Yeah, most people agree, some don't. So this is going to be great for our conversation later to talk about what are some ways that we can teach space science in a way that targets the student self-efficacy, hits the standards, but also is good for the teachers. Here's another one here. I'm not effective at monitoring space science experiments. So, wow, this is really interesting. Most people agree at this. So a lot of teachers in our audience today feel like they're not very effective at monitoring space science experiments. So that means that, you know, that's an area that we need to target for our teachers. We need to build their confidence when students are working on hands-on activities. All right, let's do, I think we have 2 more. Okay, so we have an equal representation here. Space science concepts are well enough to be effective at teaching elementary space science. Okay, most people agree. Oh, it looks like we're half and half. Some people, yeah, most people agree. A few that disagree. We need all of our teachers to be able to say that they agree. And that's no fault to the teachers. We need more professional development opportunities. We need to build their self-efficacy. Oh, we have 2 more. Kind of a mixed bag here about explaining those science experiments. Okay, that seems to be a common theme here. Those experiments, those hands-on activities are tough for teachers. And then some questions there. Okay, so we have 1 more. Here we go. Given a choice, I would not invite the principal to evaluate my space science teaching. Most of you agree. Wow, that's really interesting that you all are saying that. And so I am so excited for our group discussion to hear about what some of your challenges are and what are some ways that we can support you. And then another mixed bag here. Okay, so let's go back to our slides. And that's just fun. That's not an official survey. That's just for fun to see, you know, what our audience is at. Oops. Let's go back to the slides here. Okay. So let's have a group discussion. I really want to hear from all of you, and I want you all to be able to ask questions and collaborate with each other. So we looked at some of the SEBI-A results, our little mock survey there. It's not a formal survey, but you know, what are some ways that we can enlist those sources of self-efficacy to boost your score in the classroom? And I want you to unmute yourself and chat with each other and chat with me. Let's hear some ideas. Maybe to prompt you into thinking, what are some sources that you feel like have boosted your confidence in the past? Maybe you attended a conference, or maybe you went to a rocket launch. Maybe share some of those experiences with us.
Shall I start?
I think I can hear someone talking. Go ahead. We can barely hear you.
Sorry, my name's Andy. I do Space for All Education in the UK. What I had to do, I've been trying to build this for 7 years. So what I've had to do is I worked with the homeschools and taught one-to-one, but I taught a group of students and get the references. So that built up my confidence. And then I've been offering 3 days to schools through STEM, STEM ambassadors, so that way I can get into schools. And then I've asked them to give me the feedback of, right, what have I done wrong? What did I do badly so I can improve? Ask them to be negative, but not cruel. And take that as positive feedback, because no one's perfect. And I fully admit I am not perfect. And I said, right, if you need me to do this, I need to do it, but I need to know where I go wrong, because I need the experience so I can do better. If you don't give me the feedback, I'm not going to know. And through that, I'm still learning, I'm still improving, I'm still doing different things, but it's working, and that's what I'm getting. That's how I've developed myself and getting better.
Thank you so much, Andy, for sharing your story. Let's hear for some other folks too. Who else would like to share?
Hi, I am a teacher, but at a university level. So I never had the chance to teach younger students, but I have found that also at a university level, the students need to build a lot of self-efficacy. They they can find themselves sometimes very insecure and very at a loss. And I found that it depends a lot on the culture, because I am Italian and I have been teaching in Finland. In Italy, the teaching methods are based on the students finding entirely on their own their own self-efficacy. So they are quite left to find confidence on their own, and they're not given a lot of instruments. Instead, in Finland, they are kind of coddled, and then at a master university level, when they should be finally left alone, they don't have the tools, whereas in Italy, they do. So usually what I try to do is that I try to give everybody a safe space to make mistakes, like showing that some homeworks are not graded, so that way they can sort of try on their own. And I found that it worked in both cultures, Italian and Finnish.
Thank you so much, Camila, for sharing your story, especially hearing the difference between the cultures. That's really interesting to hear, because even in the United States, we have our own, like, almost subcultures throughout, and even at the grade levels. And so it's very neat to hear about how the students are different, and how your teachers, we really need to create an environment where students can be independent and can develop these skills independently, so that way they can succeed in the future as well. Thank you so much. Okay, let's hear from somebody else.
Kristina, there's one comment in the chat that I can read if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, first, to your question of where did you learn about this? Attending Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, really jump-started my dream of teaching students about space. And then a second comment from this same person: I build my students up by basing my teaching on their prior knowledge. Then I ask them to apply that knowledge to what it would take to live on Mars. I also stress there are many ways to accomplish the same goals. I find that comment very much after my heart.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim and Jeanette. That's for sure. Yeah. And that's a great way to get your students thinking about those vicarious experiences, that source of self-efficacy. What kind of job would they like to do on Mars? What would life be like living on Mars? It doesn't even have to be a STEM career. It can be any career, but getting your students excited about space and excited about science and what it takes to get there, that's the goal. And so, yeah, that's a great example. Get your students starting to think about what it would be like to live on another planet. Let's look at another one. Let's look at what boosts your teaching self-efficacy? And I know I kind of asked that earlier, but I really want to hear about some of your experiences that have been really influential to you in the past. Maybe why did you become a STEM teacher? Was it a teacher that influenced you? Is there a particular compliment that you've received before, that social persuasion that you've received before that really made you feel like you were good at your job?
Kristina, you're a master of wait time.
I am.
I'd just like to make a comment about that. When I started teaching, I was teaching at the middle school level. For a while, I was teaching language arts, or that was one of the classes I taught. And the language arts book that we had was actually the one that I had hated as an elementary student. And what I realized was I needed to be excited about what it was I was teaching. And so I created a unit on space because I was excited about that. But there was another piece to that too. A huge piece of teaching middle school is behaviors within the class. And I became aware that the way you get kids to perform for you and to work well for you is to help them look good in front of their peers. So what I did was I used space, that there's many different kinds of things going on any mission. And I was able to tailor opportunities for kids in my class to meet their particular interests and their particular skill sets to help them look good in front of each other. And that made a huge difference for me. And partly that was about self-preservation, having a class that operated well. But to a great degree, when I hear you talk about self-efficacy, that's what it was about. It was exactly that.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And there's so many things that you're targeting with just that one simple act of making students look good in front of their peers. They're hearing that social persuasion from the teacher. The peers are sort of seeing themselves, that vicarious experience. They're seeing their peers succeed. You're creating an environment that's warm and welcoming. So that's that physiological and affective state. Just that one simple task in your classroom, making students look good in front of each other, that targets 3 of those sources of self-efficacy. So that is a great example that leads into our last bullet point here. Brainstorming simple ways that we can target those sources of self-efficacy in a lesson. And that's so simple, that example that Jim brought up. So does anybody else have any ideas? How can we target those sources of self-efficacy within a lesson without having to change a whole lot of what we do?
For me, it was doing practical science, getting to build something, getting so that it's not just learning off a blackboard. It's no, you actually make something, and then you then say, right, this is this, this is this. You've made that, right? Now, why did we do that? And then they suddenly realize we did that to do this. I said, right, so you've just learned A, B, C, and D. You just learned physics, maths, engineering. And they look at it. No, I didn't. I didn't learn that. Yeah, you did. And they suddenly realize that they've just had a whole 3 lessons in the same amount of time because they haven't realized they're learning. Make it fun, make it enjoyable, but make it practical. So they learn without learning, and suddenly they realize they've learned something.
Yeah, that's another great example, Andy. And so by asking your students to reflect on what they learned, number one, you provided an opportunity for mastery experiences with those activities that you did. But reflecting on what they learned, that is an example of a vicarious experience, a secondhand experience. Even though they're reflecting on themselves, what themselves had learned, it still counts as a vicarious experience because they're imagining themselves succeed. So that's a great example. And that's a simple way to bring in 2 sources of self-efficacy. That's great. Okay, let's hear from somebody else.
I try to use learning diaries where the students have to report after every class what they have learned or at the end of the course. This both consolidates what they have learned, but also makes them reflect on their own path. And usually they can compare themselves at the end of a course with how much they knew at the beginning, and that works nicely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Same sort of thing, like those mastery experiences and those vicarious experience, getting students to think about what have they learned, what have they previously learned. That's a great way to target self-efficacy. Is there anybody else that we should hear from? We've heard from the same few folks. Let's hear from somebody new. Let's do this. Maybe you can answer, and it can be in the chat if you're feeling shy, that's totally fine. Maybe you can answer, what are some great resources that you have found that have built your self-efficacy through mastery experiences? So maybe it's a really cool conference that you've attended, or maybe it's a really cool professional development that you've conducted or done. Share some of those resources, and maybe you can provide a link in the chat for us, or you can share them. Unmute yourselves, please. We would love to have you engage in our conversation. Okay, so I see Andy's typing in the chat, Space Expo in the UK. Let's do this. We don't know where everybody is from. And so go ahead and type in the chat, where are you from? Where are you teaching? And then as everybody's doing that, Andy, I want you to tell us about Space Expo.
Hang on, I'll just turn my video back on. Sorry, I was halfway through the dinner, so I had to turn it off so you would see me eating. Space Expo in the UK is about 100 to 150 companies all get together in Farnborough in the UK, and you can literally walk around from stall to stall to stall and actually talk to them and say, right, I'm doing this, what are you doing, and everything like that. And me being a teacher and doing my program, I turn around to them and say, right, you're doing that, it's fantastic. How do you explain it to an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old? And it puts them on the back foot, but then they're thinking, you're teaching and I've got to, I don't know how I explain that. So how do you expect me to explain it? And it motivates them to think, right, hang on, you're doing this, we've got to be able to explain it to them because they're our future employees. They need to be able to break it down to make it more simple. And yeah, it really does motivate me to try harder to work out what these companies are doing. So when I do see kids and they turn around and ask me these fantastic questions, you never know what they're going to ask, you're able to provide some sort of answer. And a few of them have caught me out, I'm not going to lie, and I've had to turn around and say, do you know what, I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'll have to look it up and get back to you. But it makes it fun. It turns around because then they see that, hang on, he doesn't know everything, but at least he knows where to go. And that way, it encourages them to turn around and say, right, let's see if we can trick him up. So come on, give me more harder ones. Let's see if we get them. And then because of my knowledge, I do know quite a bit. But even now, I was like, you got me again. I hate this. And that shows that, you know, I may say I hate it, but it's sort of, I'm enjoying myself. They can see I'm still having fun. And that shows that I've still got a passion to drive and they still want to throw more questions at me. And it's, you know, and then when I say, right, that's enough. If you've got more questions, give them to your teachers, send them over to me. I will happily answer them to them. So always give them another avenue to keep in contact. And I leave it in their hands to keep that communication going. So that way they're still inspired. So they still want to try and trick me, but they never succeed in the end.
Yeah, this is great, Andy. Thank you so much for that example. And just in allowing your students to see, I don't want to call it a failure for not knowing the answer, but for the sake of this example, we'll call it, you know, you don't know the answer. You're providing students, number one, a vicarious experience because you show them how you deal with that failure. Okay, well, what resource can you do to find the answer to that question? And then you're also providing them an example of that physiological and affective state because you're not getting, you know, anxious and stressed out. They're seeing you calm, cool, and collected and sort of taking care of the task in a structured and organized manner. So you're hitting those two sources of self-efficacy just in that one task, just by modeling for them that, okay, you don't know the answer, let's find out together. And that also makes it a fun and engagement environment for your students as well. So thank you, Andy.
That's all right. I'm glad I can help. But yeah, this is what I do, unfortunately.
That's great. No, that's great. Thank you so much. And Jim, I see we have some more comments in the chat.
Yes, we have a okay, I am not on mute anymore. Okay. Yes, we have a comment. I have access to 2 giant Mars maps from the Aldrin Foundation and use the lesson plans that came with them. I have borrowed other lesson plans from friends. I'm constantly looking for new ways to use the maps. And I put a thumbs up to that because that's what we hope you do. I've become convinced that as hard as I work at trying to create activities, the best activities come from the teachers and come from talking with other teachers. They meet what you need, they match your kids.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jim. And Jeanette, if you want more resources, please shoot us an email. My email will be on the last slide. We have tons of resources, not just from the foundation, but other folks and partners that we work with that we can use and help you with your maps. And we're so glad that you're using them and that they're great for you. And Jim, I see that you've posted a link in the chat.
Yeah. One I just can't, I have to share. I hear a lot of people talk about going to space camp, and hey, I went to space camp too, way back. But the ATX Center at Kennedy Space Center, I think you'd find to be fascinating. It's built kind of accidentally, very much on the things that Kristina studied. A lot of those ideas went into that place. Now, the catch to it is, it's a little hard to get into. They tend to sell out. But if you're going to Kennedy Space Center and 6 months out in front, I would sure encourage you to try to get into either ATX, the ATX experience, train to be an astronaut for 5 hours, or if you go with a group, go into Mars Base 1 and do a simulated mission to Mars, where it actually takes 7 hours. But it's an interesting, cool place.
Thank you so much, Jim. Okay, so I know we're running tight on time here, and we have some folks still going in the chat. Does anybody else want to share any other resources or thoughts about self-efficacy before we wrap up our presentation?
Oh, I have another one. Sorry for being the most talkative, but I am chatting.
It's okay.
One thing that I noticed with space is that usually space is one of those things that people love very early in their life. So sometimes I see students that do not want to approach a topic like space or other topics that elicit very strong passion because they find those topics a bit later in life, and they somehow don't find that they have the same right as the others to approach the topic. So for them, I try to bring examples of people who started things later in life, like, I don't know, like Misty Copeland, who started dancing when she was a teenager, or people who went into science when they were already adults, to show them that it's never too late and that you have the right to do whatever topic you want. And you shouldn't feel excluded only because everyone else is like, oh, I wanted to do this since kindergarten. So that a bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great example because, you don't have to be in the same career forever. I changed careers after 12 years and now I'm in space education. So that can happen for anybody. And Camilla, I'm wondering if maybe, do you think students benefit from guest speakers coming into the classroom, especially if you're really picky about who you bring in, you really know your students, you pick someone who looks just like them or acts just like them?
Oh yeah, no, they like it. I never did this myself, to be honest, but when this was done to me as a student, I always really enjoyed it, not only because it broke the routine and that would like make people listen, but because it was interesting to hear people from, let's call it, the real world. Oh, and I have been brought sometimes to speak, and usually I would also get questions like, oh, why do we have to study? Or because not all students are really motivated. So I find that it really helps to give them perspective and to somehow show that life is not entirely about studying and passing tests.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about it's more than just studying. Of course, education is so important, but space is so amazing because it's interdisciplinary and it can be for everyone at all different education levels. So you don't have to have, a PhD to be successful in space education. We need technicians that go to learn those vocational skills right out of high school. We need, we have students that are in K through 12 education that are contributing to research and space education, albeit, on the simple level, but those mastery experience get them involved and excited about this. So it really is for everybody at all different education levels. And so, that's another thing to think about if you're thinking about bringing guest speakers into your classroom. It doesn't always have to be a NASA astronaut. It can be somebody that's in, a vocational skill trade too. And I see in the chat, Jeanette is saying, yes, bring in the guest speakers. They loved having ones from NASA. And I know that NASA has they have an ISS, International Space Station connectivity, where students can interview the astronauts that are on space station. So cool. Everybody gets excited about astronauts. That's a great resource as well. Any other thoughts, folks?
Yeah, just very quickly, if I may.
Yeah, of course, Andy. Yeah.
What I find is when I'm talking to the kids and they're saying, "Oh, I want to be part of the space industry," a lot of focus is in the UK is we focus on STEM. I know a lot of people are now bringing in STEAM with the arts, but what I do is I say there's a secret S on the end, and
what's that?
That's your specialist skill. What subject do you love more than anything else? You still have to do the STEM, but you have to put your heart and soul, whatever it is, you study that to your heart's content. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as you succeed in your STEM and your specialist, I can guarantee you it'll take you to space. And they love that because they turn around and say, "But I love hairdressing. We need hairdressers in space." "Oh, I love it." And then when they say, "But I don't want to go to space," I said, "That's fine. You don't have to go to space. But it means we still need people down here to do the computer work, the admin work, or whatever it is you want to do. We still need them here to send stuff up there. So no matter what it is, you can still be part of it, but you have to study."
I love that, Andy. And that's great that you're sharing that with your students and they feel relief of that. That's that physiological and affective state source of self-efficacy. See, here we are back at those sources. They're everywhere and they're so easy to implement. When you are sharing that with your students, you can probably see them, oh, like, yeah, I can do that. That feeling of joy or relief, that counts. That's a source of self-efficacy. So just in that simple task, you're raising your student self-efficacy, which is great.
And it's also the fact that when they see it, they think, right, yeah, I want to be part of space, I need to do this. But when you say you've also got to do the STEM, they understand why they then have to do it. It's not just 1 + 1 = 2. That's the way it is. No, this is this because of this. If you study these, you succeed in those and your specialist subject, you will be part of the space industry. The only person who will fail is you. You've got to set your own goals. You've got to set your own dreams. You've got to succeed in your subjects. The only one stopping you is you. Push yourself, do it how you need to do it. You need help, you need advice, you need guidance. Your teachers are here. I'm here. Talk to us. We will help you.
Yeah, that's great. That social persuasion. They need to hear that. And they need to hear that from teachers and people that they trust, that just those simple words of encouragement. I mean, that can change the life trajectory of a student. And that's amazing.
Yeah, I've had students in front of a class. I said, "I never liked space, but I love it now." I said, "Great, keep going."
That's great. Thank you so much, Andy.
That's
Is there anybody else? Okay, well, thank you all so much for choosing to come to today's session. I have my email on this slide here, Kristina@aldrinfoundation.org. I also have the Aldrin Foundation website listed there in case you are interested in learning more about what we do, more about our giant moon maps and the work that we're doing to help improve students and teachers' self-efficacy. Thank you so much for your time. I'll stick around if you all have any questions, or you can feel free to reach out and email me. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your time at your conference today. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Andy.
Before I turn off the recording, Kristina, great job. Just awesome job.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Ditto, ditto.
Hey, thanks, Quincy. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Noelle, for coming. Camila, thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.